Welcome to today's show. I'm Ivory. This is Roz, and today's topic is spiritual experiences on mushrooms. Before we get started with that, we want to say hello to our listeners, our watchers in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Thank you so much for tuning in, and it's just great having you here. It's so much fun to look and see all the different places around the world, around the country that are listening, and we just appreciate all of you very much. This is a topic I was telling Roz was actually requested by a listener, and I put it down on the list a while because I'd already had a bunch of stuff scheduled for us. So finally, the Magic Mushroom Day is here. And I want to preface this by saying, just so you know, I don't think it's legal anywhere in the United States to use psilocybin mushrooms at this point. There are places where, and we'll talk about it later in the show, where it's been decriminalized, but that doesn't make it legal. And so we'll talk about that later. I just want to kind of say too, hallucinogenic mushrooms really seem to have been part of human culture since as far back as 5000 BC. Isn't that crazy? Like, people figured it out.
Wild.
Went across multiple continents, just showing how different cultures around the world really appreciated and valued the mystical healing powers of the magic mushroom. Starting in the 1960s and then continuing today, scientific studies have been carried out showing the short and long-term effects of the active ingredients in psychoactive mushrooms, which are psilocybin mushrooms, just so you know, and the results are overwhelmingly positive. And Roz and I were just talking about chatting before we started the recording. This is big news these days. There's a lot of places that want to legalize it. There's a lot of veterans who are behind this movement because it's really good for trauma, PTSD. It's really helpful for depression and anxiety, especially if you're medication resistant or you don't want to deal with the side effects of medication, which is what it is for a lot of people, because sometimes the side effects are as bad or worse as what you've been dealing with to begin with. So hippies really embraced the compound in the 1960s, and it was touted widely by Timothy Leary. I'm sure some of you have heard about. If you haven't, look him up. He's got books. My friend who's a mushroom expert loaned me all his books on mushrooms, and I read them all about 10 years ago. They were it was really interesting about the effects and the possibilities for therapy. And he knew I was interested in it for like what can happen spiritually for people, because over dinner one night at his house, the conversation came up and I hadn't heard it before. I was very, very interested about it. People finding God, people seeing angels for the first time. We'll get into that too. There's like a long list of things people typically see when they use these magic mushrooms. So let's talk about the life-changing experiences. Have you heard about this, Roz? Like people feeling like their life was changed after trying this?
I've had a lot of people tell me that. You know, for them it was like an awakening. It was a part of their awakening. It started the process, you know, because the spiritual aspects and the intuitive aspects were so profound. And what they experienced, you know, was truly a almost like mind-blowing experience for them. And it just tore down all these walls and all of the restrictions and all of the stuff that we are told that, oh, this is the way it is, you know, this is the only way it is. Well, maybe that's the only way it is for you, but for other people, I mean, I personally have never experienced that because I have enough trouble staying in this dimension as it is. I don't need to be trying to take anything to help me cross into other frequencies. But
Good point.
yeah, I mean, I have just had so many clients tell me what an amazing spiritual and emotional experience it was for them. And I've read in the last maybe year or two that, you know, there's a lot of research and testing going on with psilocybin mushrooms now in the medical environment, clinical work with people who struggle with different physical and mental illness. So I kind of feel like it's a little bit like marijuana, the information was always there. You have people trying to block that information, and because they don't want people to do this. Now that it's become a money-making thing, well, it's okay now, and that's probably what's going to happen here.
It seemed like there was like the knee-jerk reaction in the 60s, though, like, oh, all these people are doing it. Well, that can't be good. It's a drug, but there's drugs that just get you high, and there's drugs where people are seeking something. And what a lot of people have told me about their experiences with the whole psilocybin is that it's brought them to a place of unconditional love. And that's part of seeing and experiencing the world on the 9th dimension. So anything that catapults people to that can only help the planet. It can only help us on every conceivable way, which is one of the reasons that I'm all for it. And sometimes people, I don't think even the scientists really know exactly why it works the way it does. They don't know why people have these very common spiritual experiences. Oh, the angels are coming in about this. So I don't know. They're just saying, we don't know why, but they just all have to say, all the studies are showing very clearly that there's great benefits in this. So there's also, I will say, some people report some frightening experiences, and I tried it once, and I'll explain why later in the show and tell you my experience was not good, but there's a reason. And so I'll talk about that too, so you know about it. But any kind of terrifying visions or experiences can be minimized by taking this in the proper setting, making sure the dose is the lowest minimal one that will be helpful for you, and having a person who knows what they're doing watching over you. You don't just take it. So I want to tell you about this Johns Hopkins University study, because this is big. It's where they administered psilocybin to adult volunteers who had never taken any psychedelics before. And of the 36 adults who participated in that study, 2/3 of them reported that their experience was among the top 5 most spiritually significant experiences of their entire lives, with a dozen of those people saying it was the single most profound spiritual experience they've ever had. Oh, I feel the angels again. So they're excited about this. Anything, don't you think maybe it just like pulls barriers down within us and helps people propel faster to experience these things they're hungry to see and hear and feel?
I think humans as a species are the most mind-controlled beings really possible. And if it's not somebody else controlling our mind, we're doing it to ourselves. Because we create all of these boxes, everything has to fit in that box, everything has to, so to me, the advantage to this is the removal of all of those mind controlling, and a lot of them very fearful around, fear mongering, if you want to call it that, around these kind of events. So anything that opens that door that is not dismally unhealthy, I think, people have to make a determination on their own emotional and spiritual status. Some of the clients that I've talked to about this, and other drugs used in more of a medicinal form, I think, people who are struggling with anxiety, depression, mood swings, ADD, different, very difficult to manage illnesses. They should be allowed to have access to something that is going to improve their life. Now, on a recreational level, that's a whole other ball game,
Right.
because to me, recreational drug use is just a synonym for escapism, really. You're trying to run away from dealing with whatever. And so I don't know. I think we're going to see a huge shift in the next few years as this becomes more commonly used for treatment
I do
and
too.
for
I do
helping.
too. Because this is running to something. Doing it in the context we're talking about today is you're seeking a spiritual experience, you're seeking a deeper understanding, you're seeking an openness and awareness that you haven't been able to achieve through other means. And so doing that with that intention in mind, is a whole different state of than running away, trying to escape reality. We're none of us going to improve ourselves or the world by escaping reality. Reality will still continue to happen around us. We just won't be a part of it and have no
We
say
won't,
so
yeah.
in it. So where's the joy in that? But the interesting thing is there were 3 studies around the same time, Roz, as this one I mentioned, this Johns Hopkins University, and all 3 of them came to the same kind of results, the same conclusions. So these are major universities, major respected universities around the world doing this research. And I agree with you. I think that their findings are going to lead to more clinical use. I think what's holding it back is pharmaceutical companies, because it is so profoundly helpful for things they make billions of dollars off of, like for psychiatric illnesses, for mental health issues, particularly.
Exactly.
And so they don't want that to be out there because it
Well,
could help permanently. It could be a one-time session for people.
yeah. It's interesting because I really firmly believe that our creator, that God put everything that we need in this environment for everything that needs a treatment or and unfortunately, then we got people who just want to make money. And that is worshiping that money that's their God.
It's also very dark.
It is. So, unfortunately, those are the people who control the politicians and the laws about what's legal and what's not. And you can look at the history of marijuana and the treatments, the things that they use that for treatments for, which were profoundly effective. And all of the political hoo-ha that went on about that for 40
I
years.
like that word.
Hoo-ha. So I think we have to open our minds to the possibilities that these people in power, especially in the pharmaceutical world, they're not looking out for our best good. They're looking out for their buck.
Oh yeah.
So
They
if
don't.
they find a way to monetize this for themselves only, then things will shift.
I totally agree. And I think the people rising up and enough organizations that have the people's best interest at heart rising up and demanding these changes will help. I want to list some of the other, I know we're going to really dive into more about these spiritual experiences, but since we're talking about the whole psilocybin anyway, here are some other things that's been found really helpful for treating obsessive compulsive disorder, overcoming addictions, also helping people deal with the pain and anxiety of cancer. There's just so many things. What it's done is, as far as that goes, it gives them more care and comfort, and it gives them a sense of joy and fearlessness that come with that mushroom experience, so that they live their remaining days to the fullest with dignity and peace, and they're not afraid of passing away. That's huge. I
It
think
is.
that is absolutely valuable. I'm a big advocate of death becoming a more natural thing we talk about. It's as natural as birth. I really love that some of these researchers are very cognizant about this whole spiritual experience thing. And some of them are a little bit worried that people will say, if you use psilocybin, that you're looking for a spiritual shortcut. But no drug is a replacement for mental health benefits, for other services people need. And there's a big difference in the world between a spiritual experience and a spiritual life. So maybe you have an experience with magic mushrooms, psilocybin, and it opens up a door that you haven't been able to access yourself. Then you go back and you put that to work to affect in your life as you move forward, and you're more open, you're more in touch with your spiritual side, you are feeling happier and lighter, and so you can move forward on your own spiritual and personal journey with greater excitement, with greater passion. That's what it's for, not to shortcut, not to replace a spiritual journey. It's a part of a spiritual journey for some people. Maybe some need it, and maybe some just want to experience that and see what happens.
Powerful.
So
Yeah.
let's talk about it. The types of things that people experience that are spiritual is this internal unity, like pure awareness, like they're just aware of all life on earth. Another one is emerging with ultimate reality and just feeling like, kind of like Roz is saying, like a lot of things are hidden. We're being suppressed. We're not being shown the truth in a lot of things, and just having this sudden awareness of the truth. Then the external unity, a unity of all things are alive, all is one. And that's really that unconditional love for all mankind. That is an important place to reach.
Connectedness.
Absolutely.
That's what one client told me, and I love that word.
I do too, because when you reach that point, then you start caring about people you've never met, people you never will meet, but they're fellow human beings, and you have compassion for them, you feel love for them. And so it helps people reach that point. God bless them, please, reach that point. Another one is transcendence of time and space. And people have a very hard time of putting that into words. And this is where I agree with you, Roz. As a mystic, I'm not so sure I ever want to do anything like this again. But if you're a mystic, you're already experiencing that transcendence of time and space. So be aware it might be too much, might be more than you want. So visiting other times, visiting other dimensions, other planets even. The last is the sense of sacredness. People say they feel a sense of awe and this intuitive knowledge of ultimate reality and this deep sense of joy, peace, and love. What's to complain or be against with all of that? What if more of us had that? I'd like us to all get a psilocybin dose right all at once tomorrow. Let's just do it, get this over with, and end this craziness.
I like that you mentioned the unconditional love aspect, because a lot of people have told me that they felt that connected to all of the earth, even the animals, everything that lives here. They felt a connection to that and a love. And I think that's how we're supposed to be.
That connection is there. We're all vibrating frequency, energy, so there is a connection there. How wonderful if people get the chance to feel that. What I found interesting when I was at that dinner party I was telling you about, and this subject came up, the reason they brought it up was because of the beings that people see. They report very frequently. There's some common experiences, which I'll talk about too, but there's an entity encounter associated with a full dose of psilocybin, not a microdose. And so some of the things that people frequently say that they saw would be beings that they don't even know what they are: guides, angels, aliens, spirits, helpers, elves, fairies, and plant spirits. Some of the things are more like mystical looking things, but entities are frequently felt to be supremely powerful, wise, and loving. And these encounters with beings, people report positive emotions like joy, trust, surprise, love, kindness, and friendship. So I'm going to tell you something they told me, and they know my interest in this. My friends told me who have a lot of experience with helping people with psilocybin. And they were saying that there's this common experience, and it was in those books. If you look up Timothy Leary, look up some books on magic mushrooms, that many people report seeing aliens. And when they see them, it's like suddenly they're in this room on a ship with aliens, and the aliens know who they are and they're expecting them. And they're kind of surprised, but not surprised to see these aliens there. And in some ways, it's weird. In some ways, it feels very natural. And people who've never met each other, never read these books, they just report these very similar experiences. And if anybody listening, watching has had that, please leave a comment about your experience, because I know our listeners would be very fascinated to hear about that. I wish I could tell you I experienced that, but Roz and I experienced enough of that without psilocybin, so I'm okay. Fear is another common emotion associated with entity encounters on psilocybin. And I've got to tell you, like, my personal experience was not a good one. And I only did magic mushrooms because I was going through a really traumatic time, very much in a dark night of the soul. And my friend was so concerned about me. And he's like, I think, it might help you. A lot of people can work through trauma and feel a lot better after they've done psilocybin. I'm like, okay. He goes, let's give you a small dose. And he watched over me the whole time. And I remember at one point I turned my head to say, I don't think it's working. But when I did, it felt like there was this freeze frame as I turned my head, and I started laughing. And he said, what? I said, I was going to tell you it's not working. He goes, but it is, right? Oh yeah, I feel it is. I was just laying still. So what happened for me was I was carrying so much sadness and trauma inside. And what it did was like open this floodgate. And for maybe 9 hours, I sobbed, scared the heck out of my friend. And it was not fun. At one point, I did see fairies. That's not a shock for me. And towards the very end, there was a very tall golden angel standing right over me. My friend couldn't see them, but he doesn't see angels. So that was the only beings that I saw. But other than that, like, I sobbed, and I thought of it as a very negative experience. But I realized within like a couple of weeks, I realized, you know what? I think it was a turning point for me, because I got all that out. And later I learned, like, I feel like I purged a whole lot of negative emotion and trauma I was carrying. And
And
then
that
I
is
felt
so
like,
healing.
yes, I could move on. And so I got healing. I definitely feel like I did. And later he apologized to me, and he's like, he realized that, or had looked up or something, like, it's not a good idea to take it if you're depressed, if you're really like going through a very, very hard time. If you're already super emotional, it's obviously helpful for the people with depression, but this is something different. And maybe if I tried it again, I could have a spiritual experience I haven't yet had, or a more enhanced one. I don't know if I will or not. Like Ross says, being mystics, we have so many experiences as it is. I feel pretty satisfied with that. I just sometimes don't get enough sleep because of that. So I'm not sure I want to invite more of that in. But if you're looking for that, if you're looking for something, then the other thing to talk about too is these changes people report are lasting. It's not just, it doesn't last like a week or two, or just the course of having the psilocybin in you. It goes on, profound and often lasting after effects, especially following mystical experiences. And though people might feel a lot of fatigue immediately after that mystical experience, there remains that joyful impression within them that they encountered a higher reality. They discovered new truths. And there's a lot of people who say that it changed their attitude, that it changed their minds about things, which is hard to do. It's hard for people to change their mind if they are hard set believing something. So let's talk. I don't want to forget to talk about this. There's people who go into it as atheists and come out of it with a sincere, deep belief in a higher power. It's that spiritual experience is so profound for them. So it can cause significant changes to your personal beliefs, your worldviews. Self-identified atheism significantly decreased among people who had mystical or God encounter experiences on magic mushrooms. And so, if you feel like your connection to a higher power has waned, or you never really had one and you're curious about it, that would be a reason I could see to therapeutically try this and see what it does for you. So I don't know. Like I said, I tried it once. That was maybe 9.5 years ago, 9 years ago. It's quite a while ago. I don't close my mind to experiencing it again, but it would be for a very specific purpose. Like I would ask my angels, please let me go into this experience and get in touch with XYZ, something specific I want more of. And I'm sure people out there are thinking, great, thanks, Ivory, thanks, Roz. But if it's illegal, how do we experience this? Well, psilocybin has been decriminalized in 5 cities. So write these down: Denver, Colorado; Santa Cruz, California; Oakland, California; Ann Arbor, Michigan; and Somerville, Massachusetts. In fact, Oregon is the first state to vote on legalizing psilocybin assisted therapy with the passing of Measure 109. So now be aware, this is using it in a therapist setting with a licensed therapist who's trained to use psilocybin in therapy. And these cities where it's decriminalized doesn't mean it's legal. So it's really important that you go through this licensed therapist who's been given an okay by the area they live in to do this. They know what they're doing with the dosage. They know how to watch over you. I'm not going to give out specific names of therapists because it's not legalized yet. So I encourage you, if you feel like this is something you need, something that would help you on your spiritual journey, your awakening process, not to shortcut the journey itself, but to achieve something you've been blocked on for a long time. Look up online, licensed therapist, psilocybin therapy, and you could just even say magic mushroom therapy. So any last thoughts on this, Roz?
I think when people are at a point of severe debilitating illness, they have to seek out what's going to work for them. And personally, being someone who's had strong limitations of actual pharmaceuticals that were effective, I mean, I've had to really hone in and work with doctors, to get the right thing to work for me. And if the medical community authorizes this as a medication, I think people should go for it. They're struggling mentally and emotionally.
I do too. And the more people who do it and tell others their positive experience will put more pressure on the government to legalize this, even if it's just legalized in a therapeutic setting, so be it. I can understand them wanting to be sure people are safe, not taking too much of a dosage, not being watched over. I get that. But I encourage you, if you think it'll help you, give it a try. I'm not sorry that I did, even though I sobbed for 9 hours. Here I am. I think it's one of the reasons I healed so fast and got out of that pit and turned my life around and got things on track so quickly is that session. So I'm very appreciative. Thank you for tuning in with us this week. Next week, we'll be talking about the evidence of spiritual growth, how to know that you've made progress on your personal spiritual growth. And in the meantime, we hope you have an enlightening week.